I'm Margaret Sullivan, 84 years old last April, though nobody celebrated with me except Nurse Elaine, who brought me a cupcake with a single candle. My late husband, James, would have turned 90 this year. He's been gone 7 years now. We had a good life together, 53 years of marriage, a nice home in Millfield that we bought when property was still affordable, and one son, David. David. Just writing his name makes my chest tighten. I never thought I'd be one of those elderly parents abandoned by their children. You hear the stories, of course. You see it on television programs, the sad old woman in the nursing home whose children never visit. I always thought, how terrible, but I never imagined it would be me. Not with David, not with my boy. We were close once. I have a photograph on my nightstand. David at 10 years old, gap-toothed smile, standing beside the treehouse his father built. David was such a happy child, full of questions about everything. He followed James around like a little shadow, wanting to help with every project. And in the evenings, he would sit beside me as I knitted, telling me about the books he was reading or the insects he'd found in the garden. When did that change? Perhaps it was when he went away to college. That's normal, I told myself. Children grow up and need their space. Or maybe it was when he married Melissa. She was always polite but distant, as though keeping me at arm's length. Or perhaps it began after James died. David seemed overwhelmed by his father's death, unable to face the grief. He came for the funeral but left the next day saying he had work commitments. After James passed, I managed on my own for quite some time. I kept our home as James would have wanted, the lawn mowed, the flower beds tended, the bird feeders filled. I had my routines, book club on Tuesdays, volunteering at the library on Thursdays, Sunday services at First Presbyterian. I wasn't lonely, exactly. I was getting by. When I fell the first time, I didn't tell David. It was nothing, just a stumble in the kitchen that left me with a bruised hip. The second time I broke my wrist. That's when Dr. Peterson started talking about safety concerns and living arrangements. I didn't want to worry David. He had his own life, his job at the investment firm in the city, his wife, their endless renovations on that modern house of theirs. But when I fell a third time and couldn't get up for nearly 2 hours, I finally called him. Mom, this can't continue, he said, sitting at my kitchen table, looking more annoyed than concerned. You're not safe here alone anymore. I remember the weight of those words. Not safe. After 60 years in this house. It'll just be temporary, David assured me, his voice softening a bit as he showed me brochures for Whispering Pines. Until you get your strength back. The physical therapy there is excellent. I don't want to leave my home, I told him. Mom, be reasonable. You need help. He checked his watch. I've already put down a deposit. They have an opening next month. I stared at him. You've already paid? He had the decency to look slightly embarrassed. I knew you'd resist, but this is what's best. Melissa and I agree. I didn't say what I was thinking, that Melissa had probably orchestrated the whole thing. Instead, I asked about my house, my belongings, my garden. We'll take care of everything, David promised. We can rent the house out to cover the costs of Whispering Pines. Your retirement savings won't last forever, Mom. I knew then that I was being neatly packaged away, but I also knew he was right about one thing. I couldn't manage alone anymore. My body was betraying me, and the house that once felt like a sanctuary now seemed full of hazards. So I agreed, telling myself it would be temporary. That was 2 years ago. David helped me move in, carrying boxes of my carefully selected belongings. I was only allowed to bring what would fit in my small room, some clothes, a few books, my knitting supplies, a handful of photographs. Everything else went into storage, or so he said. You'll see, Mom, you'll make friends here, David said as he arranged my toiletries in the small bathroom, and I'll visit every weekend. The first weekend, he didn't come. He called instead. Sorry, Mom. Work has been crazy. Next weekend for sure. The next weekend, it was Melissa's mother's birthday celebration. We'll make it up to you, Mom. Maybe midweek? Midweek never came. The calls grew shorter, less frequent. Always an excuse: work, travel, home repairs, social obligations. I marked the visits on my little wall calendar. By Christmas, they had dwindled to once a month. By my birthday in April, they had stopped altogether. The last time I saw my son was 5 months ago. He stayed exactly 17 minutes, long enough to tell me they'd decided to sell my house instead of renting it. The market was good, he explained. It would provide a better financial cushion for my care. What about my things? I asked. We've been sorting through them, he said, not quite meeting my eyes. Some we're keeping, the valuable pieces, the rest. Well, most of it is outdated, Mom. We donated a lot to charity. My entire life, dismissed as outdated. I didn't cry until after he left. That night, I wrote him a letter I never sent. David, today you told me you sold my home without asking me. You disposed of my possessions, your father's woodworking tools that he loved, my mother's china, the quilt your grandmother made, without consulting me. I'm not dead yet, David. I may be old, I may be frail, but I'm still your mother. I still have a mind. I still have feelings. Do you remember when you were 7 and broke your arm falling from that apple tree? How you cried, not from the pain, but because you were scared. I held you all night in the hospital. I didn't leave your side. I would never have abandoned you. Mom, I tore the letter up and flushed it down the toilet. What was the point? David had made his choice. It was around this time that I began receiving the letters from Ernest Caldwell. Ernest had been my next-door neighbor for the last 15 years, a retired English professor widowed like me, though much later in life. He'd moved in after his wife passed, wanting a smaller place. We weren't close friends, but we were good neighbors. He would clear my walkway after snowstorms. I would take in his mail when he visited his daughter in Arizona. We'd wave across our yards, occasionally chat over the fence about our gardens. His first letter arrived with a small package. Dear Margaret, I hope this note finds you well. I've missed seeing you tending to your roses. The new owners of your house have pulled them all out, I'm sorry to say. Before they did, I took the liberty of cutting some cuttings from your white climbing rose, the one you told me was your mother's. I've rooted them and am growing them in pots. When they're stronger, I thought you might like one for your new home. In the meantime, I've sent along some cookies from Miller's Bakery. The molasses ones you always mentioned were your favorite. Your neighbor, Ernest. Inside the package were the cookies, still soft, wrapped in wax paper. I sat on my bed and ate one slowly, letting the spicy sweetness fill my mouth. And for the first time since moving to Whispering Pines, I felt like someone still saw me as Margaret Sullivan, not just another old woman waiting to die. I wrote back, thanking him. I didn't expect him to reply, but he did. And so began our correspondence. Every week, without fail, a letter would arrive from Ernest, sometimes with cookies or a book he thought I might enjoy, sometimes just the letter itself, filled with news from the neighborhood, observations about the changing seasons, recommendations for novels he'd read. I learned more about Ernest through those letters than I had in 15 years as his neighbor. He taught English literature at the State University for 40 years. His wife, Claire, had been a concert pianist. They'd never had children, a regret, he admitted. He was working his way through reading all the Pulitzer Prize-winning novels. He had strong opinions about commas. His letters became my lifeline to the outside world. Through him, I still felt connected to my old life, my community. He described the new family that moved in across the street, the road repairs on Maple Avenue, the fate of the old oak tree in the park that had been damaged in a storm. And one day, about 6 months after we began corresponding, Ernest himself appeared at Whispering Pines. I hope you don't mind me dropping in, he said, standing awkwardly in my doorway with a potted plant in his hands. I was in the area and thought, well, here. He thrust the pot toward me. It was a small rose plant with delicate white buds just beginning to open. Your mother's rose, he said. The cuttings took. I thought it might brighten your room. I invited him in, cleared some space on my small table for the rose, and offered him the chair by the window. We talked for over an hour about books, about the changing neighborhood, about the rose and how to care for it indoors. When he left, he promised to visit again, if I didn't mind. I don't mind at all, I told him. The next week he returned, and the week after that. Soon his visits became as regular as his letters. Every Wednesday afternoon, precisely at 2 o'clock. He would bring a small treat, cookies from Miller's Bakery, wildflowers from his garden, a book he thought I might enjoy. Some weeks, we would just sit in the small garden at Whispering Pines watching the birds. Other times, when my arthritis wasn't too bad, he would take me for drives through the countryside, pointing out the changing colors of the leaves or the first signs of spring. Once, he even drove me past my old house. I asked him not to do that again. On my 84th birthday, when David didn't call or visit, Ernest arrived with a small cake, a single candle, and a wrapped gift, a beautiful woolen shawl in shades of blue and purple. Claire knitted, he explained as I ran my fingers over the delicate stitches. She made this years ago. It's been sitting in a drawer. I hoped you might like it. I wore that shawl every day after that, even in the summer when the air conditioning made the common areas chilly. It felt like being wrapped in kindness. I hadn't heard from David in nearly 8 months when he finally called. No apology for his absence, no questions about how I was doing. Instead, he got straight to the point. Mom, I need to talk to you about your will. I almost laughed. Of course, that would be what brought him back into my life. What about it? I asked. I've been talking to a financial advisor about estate planning, he said. Given your situation, we should make sure everything is in order. Do you remember where your will is? Yes, David, I remember. Great. I'll stop by next week and we can go over it. Make sure it's all up to date. After he hung up, I sat for a long time, holding the phone in my lap. The will, my last will and testament, drawn up 10 years ago after James died. Everything to David, our only child. The house, now sold, the savings dwindling, the few pieces of jewelry I had, still in my possession, thankfully, and James's small life insurance policy. I looked at the white rose on my table, thriving under Ernest's care instructions. I thought about the shawl around my shoulders. I thought about Wednesdays at 2 o'clock, the one bright spot in my otherwise monotonous weeks. The next morning, I asked Nurse Elaine to help me make a phone call. Are you absolutely certain about this, Mrs. Sullivan? Mr. Patterson, the lawyer, asked. He was a young man, but kind enough to make a house call to Whispering Pines. I am, I told him. Your son might contest the will. Given that you're in a nursing home, he could claim diminished capacity. I straightened my shoulders. I may be old, Mr. Patterson, but I'm of sound mind. Ask any of the staff here. I do the New York Times crossword puzzle every Sunday, in pen. He smiled at that. Nevertheless, we should take precautions. I'll arrange for a geriatric psychiatrist to evaluate you and provide documentation of your mental competence, and I'll make sure the will specifies exactly why you're making these changes. Thank you. As he packed up his briefcase, he asked, Would you like me to inform your son of these changes? I considered this. Part of me wanted David to know immediately, to feel some fraction of the hurt and abandonment I'd felt, but that would be petty. And despite everything, I didn't want to be petty. No, I said finally. He'll find out soon enough. Ernest was shocked when I told him. Margaret, I can't accept this, he said, looking genuinely distressed. That's your son's inheritance. It's mine to give to whom I choose, I replied. And I choose to give it to someone who has shown me kindness when I needed it most. But I haven't done anything special. You've been my friend, I interrupted. You've remembered I exist. Do you know how rare that is in here? How many of us sit day after day, waiting for visitors who never come, calls that are never made? You saved that rose for me. You take time out of your week, every week, to sit with an old woman and talk about books and birds and the weather. That's not nothing, Ernest. That's everything. He was quiet for a long time, looking down at his weathered hands. Finally, he said, I lost Claire so suddenly. Heart attack, gone in an instant. I never got to say goodbye, to tell her one last time how much she meant to me. After that, well, I promised myself I'd never take people for granted again. Life's too short and too precious. I reached over and took his hand. Exactly. David came the following week, as promised. He noticed the rose immediately. That's new, he said, gesturing to the plant, which had several white blooms now. Not really, I replied. It's a cutting from my old garden rose, the one Grandma planted. He frowned slightly, as if trying to remember. Oh, right. Anyway, Mom, about the will, I let him talk. He had it all planned out, how my remaining assets should be distributed to him, how my funeral should be arranged cheaply, how my few remaining possessions should be handled, mostly discarded. When he finished, I said simply, I've already taken care of it. What do you mean? I've updated my will, David, last week. He looked confused, then suspicious. Updated it how? I've made some changes to the beneficiaries. His face hardened. What changes? I took a deep breath. I've left most of my estate to Ernest Caldwell. Who the hell is Ernest Caldwell? My neighbor from Maple Street. David stood up so quickly his chair scraped loudly against the floor. The old man next door? Are you serious? Mother, he's obviously taking advantage of you. How long has this been going on? Has he been manipulating you? No one is manipulating me, I said calmly. Ernest has been kind to me. He visits every week. He writes letters. He saved my mother's rose. I gestured to the plant. So he brings you a plant and you decide to give him everything. David's voice had risen to a shout. I'm your son. Yes, you are. And where have you been these past 2 years, David? How many times have you visited me, called me? You sold my house without my permission. You got rid of my belongings, your father's things, without asking. You left me here and forgot about me. That's not fair. I've been busy. Too busy to call your mother for 8 months? Too busy to visit even once? He ran a hand through his hair, just like his father used to when he was agitated. This is ridiculous. I'll contest it. No court will uphold a will made by an elderly woman in a nursing home, giving everything to some random neighbor instead of her son. I've been declared mentally competent by 2 separate doctors, I told him. The will explicitly states my reasons for the changes. You can contest it if you want, but you'll lose and you'll waste what little money is left on legal fees. For a moment, I thought he might yell again. Instead, his face crumpled into an expression I hadn't seen since he was a little boy, hurt, confused, betrayed. How could you do this to me? He whispered. In that moment, I felt a wave of sadness so profound it nearly took my breath away. This was my son, my only child, the baby I'd carried, the boy I had raised, the man I had loved unconditionally for 52 years, and somewhere along the way, we had lost each other. I'm not doing anything to you, David, I said softly. I'm simply acknowledging the truth of our relationship as it is now, not as I wished it would be. He left without another word, slamming the door behind him. I sat in my chair by the window for a long time afterward, watching the snow begin to fall, feeling both hollow and somehow lighter. That was 6 months ago. David hasn't been back. He called once, about a month after his visit, to tell me he'd spoken to a lawyer who confirmed what I'd said. Contesting the will would be difficult and expensive. He sounded different on the phone, subdued perhaps, or resigned. I never meant to abandon you, Mom, he said just before hanging up. I couldn't bear to see you in that place. It reminded me that someday I'd lose you too, like Dad. It was easier to stay away. It wasn't easier for me, I told him. He was quiet for a moment. No, I suppose it wasn't. We haven't spoken since. Ernest still visits every Wednesday at 2 o'clock. He knows about the will, of course, but we never talk about it. Instead, we discuss the books we're reading, the birds at the feeder outside my window, the small triumphs and disappointments of daily life at Whispering Pines. He started bringing his chess set, teaching me to play. I'm not very good, but I'm learning. Last week, I caught a cold that settled in my chest. At my age, even minor illnesses can be dangerous. The doctor prescribed antibiotics and bed rest. When Wednesday came, I was too weak to get out of bed, but I insisted the nurses prop me up. I didn't want to miss Ernest's visit. He arrived promptly at 2, as always, but instead of our usual chat, he pulled a book from his bag and without comment began to read aloud. It was Pride and Prejudice, my favorite, the story of Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy. His voice, rich and melodious from years of lecturing, filled my small room. I closed my eyes and listened, drifting in and out of sleep. When I woke, it was dark outside. Ernest was still there, sitting quietly beside my bed. He had stopped reading, but hadn't left. You should go home, I whispered. He shook his head. Not just yet. In that moment, I knew with sudden clarity that I probably wouldn't live to see another spring. The realization didn't frighten me as much as I would have expected. I've had a long life, mostly good. I've loved and been loved. I've known joy and sorrow, triumph and disappointment. I've seen the best and worst of human nature, sometimes in the same person. And now, at the end, I've learned that family isn't always about blood. Sometimes it's about who shows up, who stays, who remembers that you're still alive and that your existence matters. I look at the white rose on my table, thriving despite everything, a remnant of my old life, a symbol of continuity and care. Ernest waters it when he comes, deadheads the spent blooms, turns it so all sides get sunlight. Such a small thing, but it means everything. The snow is falling harder now, coating the world outside in a clean, blank whiteness. Soon it will cover everything, the walkways, the bare trees, the bird feeders. But come spring, the snow will melt, the birds will return, and the world will renew itself, as it always does. The white rose will bloom again. Ernest will make sure of it. And perhaps someday when I'm gone, he'll take a cutting from this plant, my mother's rose, now my rose, and grow it in his garden, a circle completed. And perhaps, just perhaps, David will find his way back to what matters before it's too late. I hope so. Despite everything, I still hope so. But if not, I've made my peace. I know now that wealth, property, possessions, these aren't the real inheritance we leave behind. The true legacy is love freely given. It's the memories we create, the kindness we show, the connections we nurture. That's what I'm leaving to Ernest, not just money or property, but recognition of his goodness, his decency, his humanity. And in doing so, I've gained something precious in return, the knowledge that even at the end of life, in a small room in a place called Whispering Pines, it's still possible to find friendship, to matter to someone, to make choices that affirm our dignity and worth. That, I think, is enough. That is everything.